Hello, friends. So I'm just stuck doing some errands, and while I'm waiting, I thought I'd get on and do a quick post. I've been thinking about what to plant in my garden now that it's September, towards the end of fall, right? So it's the beginning of fall. So we just started fall on Sunday, so we're a few days in, and I've been thinking about, like what what needs to get done around the homestead. I live in a house inside of not too busy of a city, but I live in a city, so it's not like out in the country. Um, Kind of a larger size yard, and I've been thinking about doing some things differently. So one thing I've had on my mind that's kind of outside the box is planting things now or soon that tend to self-seed on my property. The reason why I'm saying that is because if they self-seed and they grow on their own without any issues, then I might not need to wait until spring for certain things. So I do live in a temperate climate. Doesn't get too cold, but we do freeze and it snows and all that kind of stuff. And some things self-seed very well here, and some kind of self-seed, but they need a little bit of extra TLC. So first of all, I'm thinking of things like my calendula. So the calendula self-seeds, but I'm going to save the seeds till spring because honestly, I don't get as many self-seeding as I do like the rose campion. Rose campion self-seeds for me prolifically. So my flowers go to seed, they drop down, and then in the spring I have all just everywhere, rose campion everywhere. So go ahead and like for myself, zone 8 in Washington State, Pacific Northwest, in a temperate climate, I feel like it's okay to plant my rose campion seeds because in my experience, my rose campion self-seeds anyway. And if I want to plant more of the seeds, which I've saved a lot of, to give out as gifts and things like that, or to sell them or trade them, or I do a lot of different plant swaps. Rose campion, I think I can go ahead and start seeding. And another one that also self-seeds really well is borage. So actually, kind of funny story. I've seen borage growing here. Beautiful, huge borage plants with beautiful flowers and wonderful all the way through snow. Like until it snowed, and even in the snow it looked pretty, but the cold actually did cellular damage to it. So after everything thawed and the snow melted, my plant did die. But in the meantime, it dropped seeds. And those seeds went through winter and snow, so they kind of like cold stratified. And they stayed dormant until it was the right time. And they had that kind of special way of knowing when is just the right time to start growing. So I think I might plant some of my old borage seeds, the ones that I'm kind of like iffy on, like they're from a long time ago, and if they don't sprout in this method, they might not sprout anyway. So I might go ahead and put some of those older borage seeds in the ground, and if they sprout and survive, then I'm going to end up having something that's pretty cold hardy anyway. And that kind of genetics is what I really want to propagate, things that I don't have to work so hard. I'm also thinking anything that's a biennial. If it's a biennial or a perennial and it's cold hardy, and especially if it needs cold stratification, but even if it doesn't, if it's a biennial and a perennial, and it also is cold hardy to some extent, I think those things are things that I might go ahead and pop some in the ground, especially if I have like a bazillion seeds, because I need to use those old seeds up anyway. And if the mother plants are dropping seeds and those are growing on their own, then I don't think there's any harm in me dropping some more seeds. and go ahead and do that. So now I wouldn't do this if these were the only seeds I had. If there's like my sacred little bundle of seeds and I have nothing except for these, I wouldn't do it. But considering that I have like full on like probably a bazillion, quadrillion, like I don't know. I think I have like almost all the seeds that Baker Creek offers. Almost all the seeds that my gardener offers. It would be really hard for me to find a seed company other than maybe Strictly Medicinal has a lot of seeds I don't have, because I really want to make sure they're things I understand and that I don't have anything that maybe like has, you know, some dangerous side effects and stuff like that. So I am kind of careful with Strictly Medicinal. I buy a lot of seeds from them, but I definitely don't have all of their seeds yet. So I'm going to go ahead and pop some seeds in the ground. Perennial seeds, perennials and biennials that are somewhat cold hardy. My weather right now is not warm enough that the seeds are going to want to sprout in the soil now. That would be a bad thing. If it was a little bit too warm, then I risk them sprouting and then getting shocked and dying. So I might even wait a little bit on a few of them. But I'm going to go ahead and plant some radishes. There's enough time for radishes and beets. And I can probably do some kale and Swiss chard and spinach. And even if they don't produce me a nice crop now, they'll probably survive. And if I start to get worried about them, I can pop a little frost blanket over them. I bought a whole spool of like this frost sheeting. It's pretty spiffy. I also bought some piping. I was watching Robbie and Gary, and I haven't used the piping before for frost covers, but I've seen somebody else in kind of near where I live. I bought a bunch of like rhizomes from him, and I saw him doing it. So after seeing him and then seeing Robbie, I was like, yeah, I probably should do this too. So I grabbed some just in case I need a little bit of extra protection. If I start to see like little sprouts and stuff, I might go ahead and cover them. But my hope is that for some of the plants like the rose campion and other things that I normally would see sprouting in the spring, just kind of willy-nilly, they just kind of sprout up by themselves, that I will frost protect them if I see them sprouting too soon. Last year, I had transplanted a bunch of strawberries, and I sprinkled in a bunch of chaff from lavender seeds. And that chaff, actually, I knew I missed some seeds of the lavender, but I was like, you know what? I don't want to throw it in the compost, because if there are seeds that will germinate, I like them to germinate. So I went ahead and sprinkled all that chaff around my strawberries, and a lot of them sprouted. So I think I would go ahead, and since that chaff actually dropped seed and sprouted for the lavender, I think now is actually not a bad time. If you already have some lavender flowers that have seeds, you could sprinkle them onto the soil and just leave them, because that's basically what I did last year, and it was about this time of year. My intent wasn't trying to plant the strawberries and the lavender together, but it actually worked out really well. The lavender plants now are about that big, and the strawberry plants are, you know, in their second year. So they're alpine strawberries, so little tiny strawberries. They're actually doing really well together. I haven't had any pest problems with them, and the lavender is small enough that it's not really interfering with the strawberries' growth. So that might be something to do also, is a little bit of chop and drop using the chaff. Like I like to put the lavender into a bag and shake it, and I save the seeds. Then whatever I have left of the chaff, I just kind of sprinkle around at the top of a garden bed, and I end up getting some free plants. So I think I will do that again, wherever I have a little bit of exposed soil around a pot, if it has plant like flowers and stuff, and then I'll just go ahead and very gingerly transplant them after a couple of years. Like the ones I have from last year, I don't need to transplant them yet. They're perfectly fine where they are. I think next summer or next spring, I'll start transplanting them, probably like one at a time. Maybe for gifts, Mother's Day or something, you know? Yeah, so that's my new strategy, is to look for things that self-seed that self-seed around this time of year when everything's falling down and starting to decompose, that I know aren't actually popping up until spring. So they're not prematurely sprouting and then being shocked by the cold weather and then dying. So you might try that too. If you think of what is self-seeding for you, that you tend to see drying and falling off of your plants this time of year, or August, September, October, and you don't see them prematurely growing and then dying, those are the things in your microclimate that you might want to go ahead and purposely plant now. And I think, this is an experiment, but I think that makes sense. Now about tomatoes. Every year I get volunteer tomatoes, but tomatoes are not cold hardy. So what happens for me is the plants drop a bunch of fruit at the very end. Usually the last little crop of fruit, like some of it gets too soft, it gets too cold, and then like too warm, and then the fruit doesn't taste very good. So I'm not very good at harvesting that time of year. They drop their fruit on the soil, and then it's too cold, so the plant dies. The seeds just kind of stay dormant, and then they sprout when the soil is warm. By the time the soil is warm, the plants don't have enough days before they become fully mature and producing fruit. So those seedlings for me tend to be really wonderful plants, but don't tend to really have a harvest. So I've got a bunch of those little seedlings, and what I'm trying to do before the first frost is to dig them up and put them in a pot, and I'm going to keep them in my classroom. If I had space in my house, I would do that, and my goal is to keep them alive, so I'm going to get a huge jump start on next year. And if I can't keep them going because they get too big and sprawling, I can also take the suckers and plant the suckers, the little plant that grows in between the joints. You can continuously take those suckers and plant those. And by doing it this way, your best plants that are acclimated to your region, you'll have those genes. And then try to get onto that cycle of their seeding at the right time. So I would take those suckers and those plants that they might get massive. Okay. They might be totally massive, crazy monsters. But then also the suckers, you can continuously pull those off and put them in water, or just plant them directly into soil, and they do great in water. And then I would just transplant them when they have roots. And then I'd have those genetics, which are going to be absolutely wonderful, because I know those plants did okay in this region. They produced me fruit. The fruit dropped, it seeded, it stayed dormant when it was cold, and it sprouted when it got warm. It just didn't have enough days. So I'm going to take those genetics, put them in a pot, keep them inside, pull off the suckers, keep propagating the suckers, and then I will have a huge jump start for tomatoes for next year. I'm also going to do the same thing with my peppers. I'm going to bring them inside. I'm going to have to pot them up and bring them in for the ones that look like they've been doing well. If they don't look healthy, bye-bye. But if they look healthy and good and they just lost you for a second, it cut out. So if the only problem I had was I ran out of time with some of my warmer season crops, like my tomatoes and peppers, potting up the plants that are the healthiest and the best fruit and all that kind of stuff, potting those up and extending their season by bringing them inside is a really good idea. I did that before with tomatoes. I kind of got crazy. But I'm going to try it again. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think my students are going to enjoy seeing them. And then also, if I have like a lot of suckers, maybe some of my students can actually take some of those home too. So that's what I'm going to do with planting some of the self-seeding cold hardy seeds now and over the next couple of weeks, and maybe in the next month or so. And then I'm going to also, in the next month or so, before my first snap of cold, which I think is supposed to be October 6th or so, I'm going to dig up all those tomatoes and peppers and transplant them and bring them in. So I don't know what you guys think about this strategy. You might think I'm crazy. Go ahead and pop a comment below. What do you think about what I'm doing? Would you do this? And what plants for you are somewhat cold hardy, that tends to self-seed. These are probably going to be perennials or biennials. Go ahead and pop your comment below. And I'd love to have this as a discussion. I might try some of the things that you suggest. All right, everybody, God bless. Be good, be sweet. Grow a garden if you want to eat. And I'll see you next time.